It started with disaster. Early in the first quarter, chasing a loose ball under the basket, Lexi Hull collided head-to-head with Seattle's Gabby Williams. The crack of skulls smacking together echoed across the arena, sending both players crashing to the floor. Williams eventually limped to the bench, but Hull walked straight to the locker room, clutching her forehead. The swelling was immediate. Cameras caught a knot growing on her face in real time, and fans winced just looking at it. For a Fever roster already gutted by injuries, losing Hull felt like the breaking point. Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, Arie MacDonald, and Cydney Colson were already out. Khloe Bby was managing knee pain. Half the backcourt rotation was gone. Could Indiana survive another loss? Minutes ticked by. The crowd murmured anxiously. And then, against all odds, Hull re-emerged. The swelling was visible, the knot glaring under the lights, but she checked back in like nothing had happened. The very first possession told the story. She dove to the floor for a loose ball, throwing her body around without hesitation. The arena erupted. What looked like the end of her night turned into the spark that lit the Fever on fire. Later, Hull laughed about it, joking that she could literally see the bump sticking out in her peripheral vision. But what she showed in that moment was more powerful than words. It was toughness, grit, and an absolute refusal to let her team crumble. Her coach, Stephanie White, called the collision disgusting, but she also said Hull epitomized the grit of this Fever team. Aliyah Boston put it even simpler. Lexie is the definition of tough, and the numbers backed it up. Hull finished with 9 rebounds, countless hustle plays, and a staggering plus 31 in her minutes on the floor. She didn't just play, she changed the energy of the entire game. That toughness set the tone for the Stars to take over. Aliyah Boston, already carrying the weight of Clark's absence, dominated every inch of the paint. She bulldozed her way to 27 points and 9 rebounds, scoring over double teams, sealing defenders deep, and making life miserable for anyone who tried to meet her at the rim. Possession after possession, she demanded the ball, lowered her shoulder, and reminded the league why she was the #1 pick. Seattle had no answers. By halftime, Indiana had doubled their rebound total, pulling down 42 boards to the Storm's 21. Every second chance bucket felt like a dagger. But Boston wasn't alone. Odyssey Sims, the veteran guard who wasn't even on the roster at the start of the season, played like she'd been wearing Fever colors for years. She dropped 22 points, slicing through defenders, finishing at the rim, and hitting the shot of the night, a deep 3 from the logo that sent Gainbridge Fieldhouse into chaos. Signed late in desperation, Sims looked fearless, even joyful, thriving in the pressure that could have crushed less seasoned players. Then came Kelsey Mitchell, the franchise cornerstone who has carried this team through highs and lows. She scored 21, stretching the defense with her quick release and cold-blooded shooting. Every time Seattle threatened to close the gap, Mitchell answered. When Boston dominated inside, Mitchell punished from the perimeter. Together with Sims, she gave the Fever balance and poise, ensuring the Storm could never load up on Boston without paying for it. What stood out most was how complete the performance felt. Without Clark, without half their guards, without much of anything that resembled depth, Indiana didn't just hang on, they controlled the game. They ran Seattle off the boards, turned defense into transition, and smothered every attempt at rhythm. The Storm finished with just 3 fast break points, a sign of how well Indiana dictated the pace. By the final buzzer, a 95-75 scoreline wasn't just surprising. It felt inevitable. For the first time in weeks, the Fever looked like a team not defined by who they were missing, but by who was still standing. In the locker room, Boston made it clear what the game meant. Yes, it was one win. Yes, it was just one step in a brutal stretch of games. But this one mattered more. Indiana had been slipping, losers in 4 of their last 5, teetering at the edge of the playoff race. Seattle was ahead of them in the standings, directly in the mix for the final postseason spots. A win against the Storm wasn't just symbolic, it was survival. "We've got to take it one game at a time," Boston said, but the urgency was written all over her face. This was bigger than one game. It was about staying alive. And still, hovering over everything, was Caitlin Clark. Her logo was on the shirts, on the walls, on the court. Her name was everywhere. Yet her game was nowhere. That's why the site, of her back in practice, running drills and testing her body again, made headlines just as fast as the victory itself. For the first time since mid-July, Clark had joined live workouts. Stephanie White made it clear, game ready yet. Returning from a groin injury takes time. She needs to absorb contact, play through fatigue, and survive multiple practices before she can be cleared. But the fact she's this close has electrified the fan base. Because here's the truth. As inspiring as this Seattle win was, the Fever need Clark to make a playoff run. Without her, they can scrap, they can fight, and they can even pull off nights like this. But with her, they can be dangerous. She stretches defenses, feeds Boston perfectly, fuels Mitchell's outside shooting, and ignites fast breaks that no other guard on this roster can replicate. When she returns, the version of this Fever team that just dismantled Seattle only gets stronger. That's why the question now isn't whether Indiana can fight. They've already proven that. It's how high their ceiling goes once Clark returns, to unlock everything else. If they can blow out the Storm without her, what happens when she's back, dishing assists, hitting threes, and drawing double teams? Could this team go from clinging to the 8th seed to flipping the entire playoff picture upside down? On the night meant to showcase Clark's brand, it was her teammates who stole the spotlight. Hull's toughness, Boston's dominance, Sims's fearlessness, Mitchell's steadiness. Together, they reminded the world that the Indiana Fever are not a one-woman show. They're a team, battered and bruised, but still alive, still fighting, still believing. And with Clark inching closer to her return, that fight may be about to get a lot louder. So what do you think? Was this win the turning point for Indiana's season? Can this group truly contend once Clark is back in uniform, or is the hole they dug earlier too deep to climb out of? And does Lexi Hull's toughness set the tone for a Fever identity built on grit and resilience? Drop your thoughts below.